The year is 450 BC. The Greek historian Herodotus stands in the blazing heat of the Fayum oasis, staring at something that defies logic. He has seen the great pyramids of Giza. He has walked the temples of Thebes. But this is different. He enters a massive complex surrounded by a single wall. Inside, he finds a nightmare of architecture. 3,000 rooms, 12 great courts, a roof made of a single stone. He writes that if you took all the fortifications and temples of the Greeks and put them together, their cost and labor would not equal this one labyrinth. He wrote that it put the pyramids to shame. He described a world split in two. 1,500 rooms above ground for the living, and 1,500 rooms deep underground for the sacred crocodiles and the secrets of the kings. For 2,000 years, modern historians read his words and laughed. They called him the father of lies. They said the labyrinth was a myth, a fantasy, a hallucination. They said such a structure simply could not vanish. But they were wrong. In 2008, a team of researchers didn't use shovels. They used ground-penetrating radar. They pierced the desert sand near the Black Pyramid of Hawara, and the machine screamed that Herodotus was telling the truth. The radar didn't show random rocks. It showed a massive artificial grid, walls, chambers, ceilings, a colossal underground city sleeping right beneath the tourists' feet. They found the labyrinth. But instead of announcing the greatest archaeological discovery of the century, the authorities did something else. They buried the report. Welcome to Hawara, about 90 kilometers south of Cairo. On the surface, it looks like a graveyard of failed ambitions. You see a crumbling mountain of mud brick, the pyramid of Amenemhat III. It looks like a melting anthill. Most tourists drive right past it. But the mud brick is a distraction. The real story isn't the pile of dirt above the ground, it is the titanic complex that lies beneath it. We are talking about the Mataha Expedition. A Belgian artist and researcher named Louis de Cordier led a team to this site, armed with the highest tech scanners available. Their goal was to settle the debate once and for all. Was Herodotus a liar? Or is there a metallic library hidden in the water table that predates dynastic Egypt? The data they came back with was terrifyingly clear. But within weeks of the discovery, the Egyptian Antiquities Service, led by the infamous Zahi Hawass, clamped down. They forbade further excavation. They claimed the results were inconclusive. Why? If they found a few pottery shards, they would be parading them on the news. But when they find a megastructure that could rewrite human history, the lights go out. I have a question for you, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. If there is a hall of records under the sands of Egypt, a library that contains truth which contradicts the Bible, the Quran, and the official timeline of history, do you think the world governments would actually let us see it? Answer yes or no below. This isn't just archaeology. This is a crime scene. Subscribe to the channel right now and let's pry open the gates to the infinite labyrinth. To understand the magnitude of what the Mataha Expedition found in 2008, we have to stop treating history like a fairy tale. We treat the ancient writers like they were children telling ghost stories around a fire. We assume they exaggerated. We assume they were confused. We assume they were lying. But what if they were just reporters? When we talk about the Labyrinth of Hawara, we aren't talking about a rumor. If you were a tourist in the ancient world, you didn't go to Egypt just to see the pyramids. You went to the labyrinth. It was on the map. It was the destination. We have not one but 4 major historical heavyweights who stood in the shadow of this building and wrote down exactly what they saw. Herodotus, Diodorus Siculus, Strabo, and Pliny the Elder. These men lived centuries apart. They came from different cultures, and yet their blueprints match. Let's go back to Herodotus. We touched on him earlier, but we need to really listen to what the man said. He was a Greek. He was used to beautiful architecture. He knew the Parthenon, he knew the great temples. But when he arrived at Hawara, his mind broke. He wrote, "I have seen this building, and it is beyond my power to describe, for it must have cost more in labor and money than all the walls and public works of the Greeks put together." Think about that. He is saying that if you took the entire infrastructure of the Greek Empire, every temple, every wall, every aqueduct, and combined them, they would still be cheaper and smaller than this one building. He describes the layout with the precision of an architect. He says there were 12 covered courts, 6 facing north, 6 facing south, with gates exactly opposite one another. The entire complex was surrounded by a single continuous wall. Inside, there was a double set of chambers, 3,000 rooms in total. Herodotus was allowed to tour the upper 1,500 rooms. He walked through them. He touched the walls. He described them as baffling and intricate, designed specifically to confuse the uninvited. He spoke of winding passages that looped back on themselves, of doorways that led to blank walls, and of the sheer overwhelming whiteness of the stone. But it was what he couldn't see that is most important to our investigation today. When Herodotus asked to descend into the lower 1,500 rooms, the underground level, the Egyptian keepers stopped him. They physically barred his path. They told him that the lower level was sacred. They said it contained the sepulchres of the kings who built the labyrinth, and also the tombs of the sacred crocodiles. Herodotus writes, "The upper chambers I saw with my own eyes, and found them to excel all other human productions. But the underground chambers I heard of only by report." Why? Why hide the lower level? If it was just a tomb, Herodotus had visited plenty of tombs. The Egyptians were usually proud to show off the grandeur of their dead pharaohs. Why was this specific basement off limits? Was it really just crocodiles down there? Or was the lower world guarding a piece of technology or a library that the priesthood was sworn to protect? Fast forward 400 years to the geographer Strabo. The year is roughly 25 BC. The Roman Empire is rising. The world has changed, but the labyrinth is still there. Strabo describes the site not just as a temple, but as a massive administrative machine. He explains that there were 27 distinct palaces inside the complex, one for each of the administrative districts of Egypt, known as the nomes. This was the Capitol Hill of the ancient world. It was where the judges met, where the sacrifices were made, where the law was written. But Strabo noticed something that defies modern engineering. He focused on the roof. He wrote that as you walked into the courts, you looked up and realized there was no wood. There were no beams. The entire ceiling was made of a single colossal stone slab, a monolith of unimaginable weight, suspended over the vast chambers. How do you lift a single stone slab that covers a great court? We struggle to move obelisks today. How did they suspend a ceiling of solid rock? Strabo also described the sensory experience of the place. He said that at the end of the labyrinthine passages, if you opened a door, it produced a noise like thunder, a terrifying booming resonance that shook the chest. Was this just a heavy door? Or was it an acoustic design? We know the Great Pyramid has resonant chambers. Was the labyrinth designed to manipulate sound frequency? Then we have Pliny the Elder. He was writing even later, in the 1st century AD. By his time, the labyrinth was ancient, but he still describes it as a bewildering maze of paths. He talks about rooms that were completely dark, requiring artificial light at all times. He talks about columns of porphyry, an incredibly hard purple stone that is difficult to cut even with diamond tools. Pliny gives us a haunting detail. He says the labyrinth had hanging wings, and that to reach the center, you had to traverse ramps and porticos that seemed to defy gravity. He also mentions that the structure was so confusing that visitors required a guide or a ball of thread, just like the myth of the Minotaur, to find their way out. Finally, Diodorus Siculus. He connects the labyrinth to a king named Mendes, or Maris. But Diodorus adds a crucial piece to the puzzle. He says the labyrinth was the model for the labyrinth of Daedalus in Crete. We all know the Greek myth of the Minotaur, the maze, and the beast. Historians tell us that's just a story. But Diodorus is telling us, no. The story in Crete was based on a real building in Egypt. The Egyptian labyrinth was the original. The myth was just a cheap copy of the reality at Hawara. So here is the problem. We have 4 credible witnesses spanning 500 years. They all saw the massive walls. They all saw the 2 levels. They all saw the stone roof. They all agreed it was the greatest structure on Earth. And yet, if you go to Hawara today, what do you see? Nothing. You see a few scattered pillars. You see the eroded mud pyramid. But the 3,000 rooms, the white stone walls, the roof made of a single slab, gone. Mainstream archaeology tells us that the labyrinth was quarried away. They say that over the centuries, people came and took the stones to build other things. They say the Romans took the granite, the locals took the limestone, and eventually, the entire building was dismantled, block by block, until nothing was left but dust. Does that sound plausible to you? We are talking about a structure larger than the temples of Karnak and Luxor combined. We are talking about millions of tons of stone. To quarry away the Great Pyramid would take an industrial effort that would leave massive scars on the landscape. And yet we are supposed to believe that the greatest building in human history was picked clean, down to the last pebble, and no one noticed. Or is there a simpler explanation? Remember what Herodotus said. 1,500 rooms above and 1,500 rooms below. What if the Romans and the locals did take the stones? What if they stripped the upper level? What if they dismantled the 1,500 rooms that were above the surface? That would leave the lower world exactly where the priests said it was. Underground, protected by the sand, protected by the mud, and eventually forgotten. When the archaeologists look at the ground at Hawara, they see a flat, sandy plain. They assume the foundation has been ripped out, but the ancient testimony suggests that they aren't looking at a foundation. They are standing on the roof. The upper world is gone. But the lower world, the vaults, the crocodile tombs, the metallic library, the secrets that Herodotus was forbidden to see, is still there. It has been waiting in the dark for 2,500 years. And in 2008, when the Mataha Expedition turned on their radar, they didn't find a ghost. They found the lower world. They found the grid. They found the dark, water-filled chambers that Strabo and Pliny warned us about. The ancients weren't lying. We just weren't looking deep enough. The year is 2008. The location is the windswept plateau of Hawara. For decades, this site had been dismissed by the academic elite as a ruin of little consequence. They looked at the mud brick pyramid of Amenemhat III and saw only erosion. They looked at the sand and saw only emptiness. They told the world that the Labyrinth of Herodotus was a ghost story, a myth that had been quarried away by the Romans until nothing remained. But Louis de Cordier did not believe them. De Cordier was not your traditional archaeologist. He wasn't interested in sifting through dust for pottery shards or translating hieroglyphs that had already been read 1,000 times. He was a researcher who understood that the next great frontier of archaeology wouldn't be found with a shovel. It would be found with a frequency. He assembled the Mataha Expedition. Mataha is the Arabic word for labyrinth. The name itself was a challenge to the establishment. While the orthodox Egyptologists were busy polishing statues in Cairo, de Cordier brought a team of geophysicists from the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics, along with experts from the University of Ghent. They brought the ultimate weapon against the desert's secrets, ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. For those who don't know, GPR is essentially an MRI for the Earth. It fires electromagnetic pulses deep into the soil. When those pulses hit soft sand, they travel smoothly. But when they hit solid matter, granite, limestone, basalt, they bounce back. By measuring the time and strength of that bounce, a computer can construct a three-dimensional image of what is sleeping beneath the surface. It sees what the human eye cannot. The team established their survey zone on the south side of the Hawara Pyramid. This was the precise location where Herodotus, Strabo, and Diodorus all claimed the entrance to the Great Labyrinth once stood. The archaeologists said there was nothing there but bedrock and water. The team began the scan. Day after day, they dragged their equipment across the scorching sand, walking in precise lines, building a data set of the underworld. The tension was palpable. If the screen showed random noise, the skeptics were right. If it showed jagged, chaotic shapes, it was just natural geology. But nature does not build in straight lines. Nature does not understand geometry. When the data was processed and the images finally rendered on the monitors, the silence in the tent was heavier than the stones of Giza. They didn't see rocks. They didn't see random fissures. They saw a grid. The radar revealed a colossal, artificial anomaly hovering between 10 and 15 meters below the surface. It was a sprawling network of vertical walls and corridors, laid out with mathematical precision. The walls were thick, massive barriers of stone several meters wide, and they were connected. They formed rooms, they formed halls, they formed a structure that extended for hundreds of meters in every direction. The data was undeniable. The scan showed a footprint of 304 meters by 244 meters. To put that in perspective, you could fit the massive temples of Karnak and Luxor inside this footprint and still have room to walk around. It was a megastructure. The scientists looked at the phase shifts in the data. They weren't looking at a solid foundation slab. They were looking at a ceiling. The radar waves were bouncing off a roof. This confirmed the most unbelievable part of Herodotus's testimony, that the labyrinth was covered by a single, continuous plane of stone. The team realized they were standing on top of the largest roof in human history. But as they analyzed the depths, the data revealed a complication that protects the labyrinth better than any curse or army ever could. The water. The scans indicated that the structure sits directly within the saltwater table of the Fayum oasis. The lower world, the sacred level that Herodotus was forbidden to enter, is submerged. This aligns perfectly with the ancient accounts of the crocodile vaults. Strabo described the lower levels as being accessible only by the priesthood, housing the sacred reptiles of the god Sobek. Today, that level is a dark, watery abyss. The water is highly saline, filled with aggressive minerals from the nearby canal. This brings us to a terrifying realization. If there is a library down there, if the Hall of Records predicted by Edgar Cayce is resting in those chambers, it has been soaking in corrosive salt water for thousands of years. However, the Mataha data showed something else, something that suggests the builders knew exactly what they were doing. As the geophysicists analyzed the electrical resistivity of the ground, essentially measuring how well the Earth conducts electricity, they found anomalies that shouldn't be there. Stone is a resistor. It blocks electricity. Water is a conductor. But there were specific zones within the grid that showed conductivity levels that were off the charts. This is where the whispers began. This specific type of resistivity signature is often associated with metal, massive amounts of it. Why would a tomb from the Middle Kingdom have a metallic signature large enough to show up on a geological scan? The Egyptians used gold for masks and jewelry, yes, but they did not build walls of metal. They did not pave floors with gold. Unless the labyrinth isn't just a temple. The modern theory, supported by the data that was quietly circulated before the shutdown, suggests that the library isn't made of papyrus scrolls that would rot in the damp dark. It suggests the library is etched onto plates. Gold, indestructible alloys, a technology designed to survive the flood, designed to survive the salt, designed to wait for a civilization advanced enough to find it. The Mataha Expedition had done the impossible. They had proven that the history books were wrong. They had proven that Herodotus was telling the truth. They had found the grid. They had found the roof. They had found the anomalies. They had the coordinates for the greatest discovery of our time. They prepared to announce it to the world. They thought they would be heroes. They were wrong. They didn't realize that by finding the labyrinth, they had just walked into a different kind of trap. One made not of stone, but of politics, silence, and suppression. Because when you find a truth that changes everything, the system doesn't applaud. It panics. August 2008. The air in Cairo is thick with heat and anticipation. The Mataha Expedition has the data. They have the 3D models. They have the proof that the mythical Labyrinth is a physical reality. The University of Ghent is ready to publish. This is the moment where the history books get rewritten. This is the moment where the world learns that a megastructure twice the size of Karnak is sleeping beneath the sand. But the press conference never happened. The headlines never ran. The discovery of the millennium wasn't met with fireworks. It was met with a gag order. To understand why, you have to understand the gatekeeper of the Nile, Dr. Zahi Hawass. If you have watched any documentary on Egypt in the last 30 years, you know the man. He is the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities. He is the pharaoh of modern archaeology. Nothing gets dug, nothing gets scanned, and nothing gets released without his signature. He has done incredible work for Egypt, but he is also famous for his iron grip on the narrative. Initially, the relationship seemed functional. The Mataha team had their permits. They were working within the system. But the moment the data revealed the true scale of the grid, the moment the metallic anomalies and the deep underground chambers were identified, the mood shifted violently. The Egyptian authorities issued an immediate halt to the project. The expedition was told to stop. The report was classified. The findings were not to be shared with the public. Then came the public denial. When rumors began to leak, Zahi Hawass went on the record. He didn't say, "We found something interesting and we need time to study it." He didn't say, "It's a delicate site." He said, "There is nothing there." He dismissed the state-of-the-art geophysical data as hallucinations. He claimed the radar was merely picking up the water table and creating ghost images. He reverted to the old, safe academic line. Herodotus was lying, the labyrinth was dismantled, and there is nothing at Hawara but a pile of mud. This reaction defies logic. Tourism is the lifeblood of the Egyptian economy. A discovery of this magnitude, a city of the gods under the sand, would rival the pyramids of Giza. It would bring millions of tourists. It would bring billions in revenue. It would be the crown jewel of Hawass's career. Why would he throw it away? Why would he deny it exists? Unless the labyrinth contains something that the Egyptian government, or perhaps powers even higher than them, does not want us to see. There are three prevailing theories about the shutdown, and each one is darker than the last. Theory number one is the structural trap. This is the benevolent theory. The labyrinth is submerged in the saltwater table. The water pressure is likely the only thing holding the roof up. The salt has crystallized in the cracks of the stone. If you were to pump the water out to explore the library, the change in pressure could cause a catastrophic collapse. The entire plateau could cave in, destroying the site forever. Perhaps the authorities know it's there, but they know they lack the technology to open it safely. So they deny its existence to keep looters and rogue archaeologists away. They are protecting the site by erasing it. Theory number two is the ideological threat. Egyptology is built on a very specific timeline. The pharaohs arose, they built the pyramids, they developed civilization. It is a story of linear progress. Zahi Hawass has famously and aggressively stated, "There is no hidden civilization in Egypt." He fights tooth and nail against anyone who suggests the Sphinx is older than 2500 BC or that the pyramids were built by a lost technology. But the labyrinth poses a massive problem for this timeline. The scans suggest a complexity and scale that is hard to reconcile with the Middle Kingdom mud brick pyramid sitting on top of it. If the labyrinth turns out to be the work of a pre-dynastic civilization, if it is the legacy of the first time, the Zep Tepi described in Egyptian texts, it destroys the official narrative. It means the pharaohs didn't build the greatest structure in Egypt, they just built a mud pile on top of it. It steals the glory from the dynastic rulers and hands it to a lost epoch. To the establishment, that is heresy. Theory number three is the vault, or the national security angle. This brings us back to the metal, the anomalies, the Hall of Records. Edgar Cayce, the famous sleeping prophet, predicted decades ago that a Hall of Records would be found in Egypt. He claimed it would contain the history of Atlantis and the secrets of advanced ancient technology. The Mataha scans showed high conductivity signatures. This suggests massive amounts of metal or perhaps active energy sources deep in the lower world. If the radar detected gold, that's a treasure issue. But if the radar detected technology, if they found machines, if they found a library not of papyrus, but of exotic alloys containing data on energy manipulation, anti-gravity, or genetics, that is no longer archaeology, that is national security. You do not let a Belgian artist and a university team dig up a power source that could change the geopolitical balance of the world. You do not let the public know that the ancients had tech that surpasses our own. You shut it down. You confiscate the data. You declare the site a military zone or a protected area where no digging is allowed. And you tell the world it's just a swamp. This isn't just speculation. We have seen this pattern before. The void in the Great Pyramid? Detected by muons, then ignored. The Osiris Shaft tunnel system? Explored briefly, then sealed. The Sphinx water erosion hypothesis? Debunked with fury, not facts. The pattern is clear. Discovery, panic, suppression. But Louis de Cordier refused to play by their rules. He realized that the official channels were dead. He knew that if he waited for permission, the truth would die with him. So, in a move that likely blacklisted him from Egyptian archaeology forever, he leaked the data. He created the website Labyrinth of Egypt. He uploaded the presentation. He released the images of the grid. He published the lecture given at the University of Ghent. He essentially said, "I don't care what the minister says, look at the screen. It is there." Because of his actions, we know the truth. We have the map. We know that beneath the feet of every tourist walking through Hawara, there is a grid of 3,000 rooms. There is a street wide enough for a procession. There are walls thicker than bunkers. And there is a lower level, filled with dark water, guarding something that scared the Egyptian government into silence. The labyrinth wasn't lost. It was hidden. And the people keeping the secret aren't ancient priests. They are modern bureaucrats. The question isn't, does it exist? The science says yes. The question is, what are they so afraid of us finding inside? So where does this leave us? We are left with a ghost story, but not the kind you tell around a campfire. This is a ghost story backed by hard data. It is a ghost story validated by the University of Ghent and the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics. We are left with a site that is visibly broken, but invisibly perfect. If you go to Hawara today, you will see a tragedy. You will see the Black Pyramid of Amenemhat III, a slumped, eroded mountain of mud brick that looks more like a natural formation than a monument. You will see scattered pillars and debris. You will see a landscape that seems to confirm the mainstream story, that this was a failed project, looted and destroyed by time. But now you know what lies 10 meters beneath that deception. You know that while the tourists snap photos of the mud, they are walking on the roof of a structure that defies explanation. You know that beneath their feet lies a grid of 3,000 rooms. You know there are walls of white stone, thick and impenetrable. You know there is a lower world, submerged in the dark, salty waters of the Fayum, guarding a secret that has been sealed since the days of Herodotus. We have to ask ourselves, what is in those rooms? If the metallic library theory is true, we aren't just missing a few chapters of history. We are missing the entire prequel. Imagine if we could drain the water. Imagine if we could send a drone down into the crocodile vaults. What would we find? Would we find the standard sarcophagi of the Middle Kingdom? Or would we find the imperishable records of a civilization that was old when the pharaohs were young? Would we find the technical blueprints for the pyramids? Would we find the star maps of the Zep Tepi the first time? Would we find the answer to how they cut the granite, how they lifted the monoliths, and who really built the Sphinx? The labyrinth is the ultimate cold case. It is the Area 51 of antiquity. And the most frustrating part? It isn't lost. We don't need a treasure map. We don't need to decipher a cryptic code. We have the GPS coordinates. We have the radar scans. It is right there. The only thing standing between us and the greatest discovery of human history is a fence, a permit, and a silence that has lasted for 2,000 years. The authorities want you to believe that the labyrinth was quarried away. They want you to believe the ancients were liars. They want you to believe that the history you learned in school is the complete and final truth. But the ground-penetrating radar doesn't lie. The scan doesn't have a political agenda. The machine simply looked into the earth and reported what it saw: order, geometry, complexity. The labyrinth is waiting. It has survived the Romans. It has survived the Christians. It has survived the Muslims. It has survived the looters. It is waiting for a generation brave enough to stop looking at the mud and start looking for the door. History is not what you are told. History is what you find. If you believe that the gates should be opened, if you believe that the world has a right to know what is sleeping in the water at Hawara, then you need to make some noise. Share this video. Tag the organizations. Keep the name Mataha alive in the algorithm. The ancients built it to last forever. The least we can do is remember that it's there. This is Quantum Science Stories channel. And this is the story they tried to bury. And until next time, keep digging.